All right, we are live for our first SEO Leadership webinar for 2024. And for our first guest, we have on Crystal Waddell. She is an SEO strategist and coach for small businesses. And she is also the host of the Simple and Smart SEO show, which has been doing incredibly well. You just hit 50K downloads, so congratulations on that. So yeah, you've been doing amazingly. So we are so excited to have you on the webinar today, Crystal. Thank you for kicking it off with us on our first episode.
Wow. Well, thank you guys
And
so much for having me.
awesome. And I believe it's super early by you, 7 in the morning now.
Yes, 7:30
Right.
a.m. Yes, bright and early.
Bright and early. Awesome. Crystal, we're just going to kick things off with a nice and easy question. How important do you consider soft skills within team structure, within teams leadership? And how do you sort of actively ensure that it's practiced within the teams that you coach?
Well, I think soft skills are growing more and more important, as the years go on, because so many people have technical skills and, some people can follow a checklist and do different things, but skills like empathy and being able to connect with people, especially in leadership, that's like the most important skill. Because I've been a volleyball coach, as well as a coach for SEO, and they're not that dissimilar, and it's all about building relationships first and being able to, kind of meet people where they're at and then help them grow, So I feel like soft skills are only going to become more and more important. And it's even the idea of empathy seems to be emerging as this novel idea, and it's like, it's nothing new, but yeah, caring about people, thinking about, their situation and making your work environment conducive to someone, growing despite any circumstance they have in their life, that's only going to be more important, I think, as the years go by.
Awesome. And and what do you when you look for when you're coaching your teams, how do you identify A players within those teams, and how important do you think A players are within teams?
Well, I mean, they're very important. And I think the best way to identify A players is like that energy match, because if you're passionate about something, you want to be around other people who are passionate about that thing. And again, going back to my days coaching volleyball, I had teams where we would have 2-a-day practices and we would get there early, ready to go because we loved the game. And my husband, he made a horrible comment. Well, I won't even say it here, but we love volleyball, right? So you want to find people that match your energy. And then also, when you walk into a store and everybody hates their job, but that one person that kind of stands out, that's smiling and helpful and wants to, make your experience great, that's an A player to me. That's the person who comes to work ready to do what needs to be done, because not every day is going to be perfect. But when someone has that intrinsic motivation to be the best that they can be, that's the A player that I'm looking for.
And then in terms of I think relating this back to aspects like lockdown and also the inclusion of AI over the past year as well, how do you how important are A players in terms of like evolving the business and helping the team sort of like trudge through those moments? And yeah, are there like specific like aspects that you look for within an A player that like you say, okay, cool, like that's an A player that needs to join the team?
Yeah, I think it's the person that comes to you and says, "Hey, I read about thus and so in this publication, or I was exploring this over here." It's the person that goes outside of the call of duty to make themselves better. The person that's going to maybe even a conference on their own or whatever. Those are, even in an interview, the person that's done self-study, something to make themselves stand out, that is just so important. And some of the people that I've worked with inside of my coaching programs that I'm just also inspired by are the ones that have said, "Hey, you said this, and then I went and I sought out more information on that thing on my own," and so that's so important. Like this, it's a self-starting mechanism, I guess, in some respects. But it's just the fact that, like, hey, something new's on the horizon. I just heard about this. I'm going to explore it deeper, and I'm going to bring it back to you so that we can discuss it together.
Awesome. That's very interesting.
And Crystal, obviously going in and coaching, is there any sort of core skills that junior SEOs at the minute are sort of lacking? Have you noticed like a particular trend or tactical skill?
Well, the one thing that I've observed just over the last year or two is it feels like there is a little bit of a delay in adaptation of past SEO practices compared to what is on the horizon of the future and what is here right now. And so I'm still kind of shocked at, just some of the practices that may not even be relevant or helpful for businesses in the upcoming years. So if someone is learning in a role where they're, just checking boxes of tasks that they need to complete for an SEO project, I don't think that they're going to be as prepared as they need to be for this, technological revolution that we're in right now. And so that's one thing that does concern and surprise me about some of the practices that I've seen.
And with your sort of coaching, is there like a particular niche that maybe SEOs struggle with more than others, or is it more sort of just general?
Well, I'm of the mindset that all of it goes together, so I think maybe it's also because of my educator background. It wasn't that we were expected to do one thing. We were expected to do all things all the time, whenever asked, So, technical SEO definitely has its challenges because it's just so tedious and, fixing a lot of those issues. But then there's also that element of user experience. So a lot of people will create their website, but not have someone actually use it to see if it's, functioning correctly, or if someone can complete the task, or if there's a way that they can, just improve it so that whatever task needs to be done can be done faster and more efficiently and just better for the customer. So I think there's just so many elements, particularly the groups that I coach working with Shopify stores, that they are, everything's kind of new, and it's almost like you got to do a little bit every day versus just being able to focus on one thing, like if you were in a SEO role at a company. So that's the biggest challenge, for entrepreneurs and people who are wanting to start their own websites and Shopify stores and that sort of thing.
Yeah, brilliant.
Building off of the challenges aspect, do you ever find that your teams struggle with imposter syndrome, or have you also experienced it yourself? And do you have any tips to help overcome that?
Yes. And I remember anytime I can hear someone speak about imposter syndrome and how they overcome it, I love to just go in there and listen because, I think at every stage of my life, I've experienced imposter syndrome. And it's crazy because as a high school athlete, I was, very good in the newspaper, that type of thing, but I never felt like I deserved an award. And then when I coached volleyball, we're doing really well, won awards there as well. But every time I showed up, I wasn't sure whether, I was the right person for the job. So, confidence and just reminding yourself of what you've done is so important. And I have notebooks upon notebooks of ideas and thoughts that I've had over the years. And so sometimes when I personally am feeling that creep of imposter syndrome, I'll go back and look in those notebooks, and then I can kind of have a giggle about what I didn't know then versus what I know now. So it's a little bit encouraging to do that. And then the other thing with imposter syndrome, the only thing that really can combat it, besides the mental work that comes with combating it, is experience. And when you're prepared for what you're doing, that's when you have the confidence to say, hey, I'm prepared for this. And that's how I know I can do it, even if, mentally or emotionally, I'm feeling a little bit insecure.
I love that you also related back to your volleyball days as well. One of our previous guests that we had on, Matthew Martin, he is in jiu-jitsu, and he always compares his SEO strategies to how he applies practices and strategies within jiu-jitsu. So it's very interesting that you also love to apply like that mindset and that leadership approach from volleyball over to SEO and strategies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean,
Awesome.
when it comes to teamwork is teamwork, and
Yeah.
so sometimes it's nice to have those analogies to connect some of the harder concepts too. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Definitely.
100%.
And Crystal, you talked about sort of soft skills at the start. I think we met at Brighton SEO in San Diego. Obviously, it was a great time. But how important is sort of personal branding for SEOs coming up as well to like get those job roles? Because we see a lot of people, especially on LinkedIn and stuff, people who are actively posting, actively commenting, getting that following. It seems to open a lot more doors for them for roles going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the traditional networking is so difficult because that used to be, you go to your local chamber of commerce or whatever, and you're interacting in person with people locally. And now we're in this global community, which I love. I love being a part of a global community. I love being a part of something that's bigger than myself. But it also makes it more difficult to build relationships. And that's where it all stems from, is relationships. Can someone trust you? Do you know someone that they know that can vouch for you, and that they trust you? And that's been the value of networking for years. And so I think that's what is really important now more than ever. And I realized that at the conference, just having that time to interact with other people in the industry. And it's even a great way to find out about roles that you may not have known existed, and I didn't know about SEO for hire until I met you there. And the role that you guys play in placing SEOs, and kind of serving as that facilitator and the person to say, hey, we can vouch for this person or whatever. So I just think that, getting out there, networking, talking to people, finding ways to connect, because that's how people remember you, is if you can connect with them on something beyond just the scope of work. And so I think that's just so important in the future. And, as the world gets bigger yet smaller, because humans will be playing like a smaller role and machines will be playing a bigger role, really making those human connections are going to continue to be so important.
Definitely. And you mentioned about imposter syndrome as well. We have a lot of people who maybe are going from slightly more junior roles into like a management position. Do you have any pieces of advice to give them to sort of incorporate into that first 90 days of that new role?
Ooh, that's a good question. I just think maybe, not being afraid to ask questions, really taking the time to prepare every day for what's expected. And, as a leader, that's one thing that's also very important, is to share the expectations so that people can measure themselves against the expectations. It's really difficult to know if you're doing a good job if you don't know what the definition of a good job is. And so I would just make sure in those first 90 days, I was very clear about the expectations of me in that position, and, just kind of find a way to make my own guidelines within that where I can be successful. So ask questions, understand your role, and then just go out there and knock it out of the park.
Brilliant.
Awesome. Mine is sort of a two-part question. The first part of the question revolves around just prior to deciding if a team needs to bring on another team member. Do you have you had any moments in your teams that you've coached where they're deciding to bring on a new team member, and what is sort of that line that they need to cross to realize that they need to bring on a new team member? And the follow-up question is, are there any sort of key aspects that you consider important when onboarding a team member?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the rule of thumb that I've heard, and I'm kind of abiding by personally in my own business, is that once you hit 250K, that's about the time that you look to onboard another team member. Ideally, when you get overwhelmed and you can't do all the work by yourself, that would be the best time to hire another team member. And in the way, or in the time of virtual assistants, and especially like specialized virtual assistants, this is a great way where maybe you can't hire someone full-time, but you can offload some tasks that either are repetitive or that you can show someone and they can, take that off your plate, even if it's not a full-time person. Now, having said that, one of the biggest fails that I've had as a business owner is bringing on help, like hiring part-time people, even for our business, to do shipping and stuff like that, but not having an SOP for them. And so that's when you realize that, like, as a business owner, I'm the bottleneck of my company, so that's the growing pains of hiring people. And whether you're sending files digitally to someone, or tasks digitally to someone, or they're physically doing something like in your warehouse or your store, having a procedure list is so important for them to follow, because that gives them something to check themselves against, so they can, again, know what's expected, try to meet that expectation. And then if there's a problem, then they can ask someone for help. But without those clear parameters, it's really difficult to onboard somebody successfully.
Brilliant. And I mentioned it before about the importance of personal brand and stuff, but we have a lot of people asking us how to stand out when they're going for a job interview or when they're applying for a role, because at the minute the SEO job market's very competitive. We're seeing, like, especially on LinkedIn, there could be 400 or 500 applicants for just one role. We always say, personal brand, create side projects, do any sort of affiliate sites, anything like that can sort of showcase that you do it sort of outside work as well. Do you have any sort of advice that you give to SEOs that you're coaching on how they can stand out when applying or for a new role?
Well, absolutely. I think having a project of your own that you can showcase the skill set that you've put into practice, because starting something from scratch is completely different than coming into an enterprise level project that has been a machine for years, so showing that you are up to date on best practices. But also the soft skill part of it, if you have the technical knowledge, and I'm going to assume the baseline here is that someone has the actual SEO skill set to do the job, what's going to set you apart is, again, your ability to communicate or build relationships with the people that you're going to be working with, because they're making a decision on, can I work with this person? Will I enjoy being around this person? Will we be a good fit together? Can I trust this person? And so you have a limited amount of time to present yourself in that light as a personal brand and say, yes, you can do all those things with me. And so, like, a couple of practical tips I would say is, if you know who you're going to be interviewing or interviewing with, find out some details about them, find out some details about their life, do some research, some digging to see if you have a common either connection, common interest, anything like that, that will allow you to kind of pierce through what is that initial barrier, where it's everything's so stiff, so that you can actually relate to that person on a person to person level versus interviewee and interviewer.
Definitely. And we've chatted to a lot of clients recently who are looking for SEOs who are able to communicate in terms of sort of to C-suite people. So, and not just talking about sort of impressions, click-through rate, everything like that, but more about sort of revenue that the SEO is generating and things like that. How do you sort of coach that? Because it's not necessarily coaching SEO, it's coaching sort of a new way of speaking to people, a new language.
Yeah, and that's the difficult thing for, I feel like, past SEOs coming into the now and the future. But again, as a business owner, SEO has always been linked to revenue or outcomes, or how are we going to measure this? How are we going to say that it's successful? And how is it contributing to our overall goals? And so I think what's really important is that as an SEO, you understand the business goals. So what are the overarching business and marketing goals of the company? And then understanding, like, where your efforts are supporting that. Because if you can go in and talk about how your efforts are supporting certain or specific initiatives, then that's the language that the C-suite understands. Click-through rates and impressions, all that type of stuff, vanity metrics, that is not going to be impressive when you go in and say, oh, we got 1 million clicks. And then they say, well, our revenue actually dropped by 3% or something last quarter. I mean, that's just kind of embarrassing, right? So you have to know how, what those initiatives are, how your work supports it, and then go in there and share that.
Brilliant. And when you're coaching teams, do you have to sort of differentiate between somebody working in-house versus somebody working in agency? What's the key difference in that when you're coaching them? Because obviously one's a lot sort of faster paced compared to the other one.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I wish I could answer that one. I can't, because the people that I coach they own their own Shopify stores or their own websites. They're entrepreneurs. So I don't know anything about them actually in that other role.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
I'm gonna shift the questions more towards business leader at this point in time, and just ask you, on a personal level, have you experienced, or as a business entity, any bottlenecks in the past year, and how did you sort of identify that at first? I guess this can relate back to SOPs as well, and adapt to it or resolve it.
Well, again, just actually creating procedures, writing things down and saying, hey, this is how they are done. The podcast is a great example of that because for the first part of the podcast, I had a partner. And so we had to work together to figure out, okay, who's doing what? When is this being done? Who's booking the guests? Like, do they have what they need? Do we have a workflow set up? So there was a lot of that with the podcast, which was, kind of interesting and fun to dissect and then perfect, I hope. But I forgot the question. I'm so sorry. Talked myself into a circle.
Sort of just how do you identify the problems that key bottlenecks within the year, and how did you sort of like adapt or resolve it?
Well, anytime it stops with you, anytime it stops where, people can't move forward because you haven't made a decision or you haven't gotten back to them, that is the bottleneck that needs to be solved ASAP, because the machine should continue to run whether you're there or not. So, that's really important. Anytime that we've had either with the podcast or with, my business, or even with, talking and communicating with the community members in my group, it's like that's when things stop because I'm not immediately there to solve the problem. That's when it's like, hey, we have to either figure out an AI solution for this or, a new step in those standard operating procedures.
Awesome. And just transitioning into AI, over the past year, it was a hot topic in 2023. With your clients and with your teams, were there any sort of prevalent issues that they faced where they had to adapt quickly, and how did you sort of like them work through that and needing to adapt?
Yeah, I think with entrepreneurs who are doing their own websites, one thing that's a big challenge is writing and all of the content that goes on to the websites. And so the introduction of large language models was actually a true benefit to the smallest business owner. And so like training them how to, write articles and then also how to rank for articles, and using, I don't mean to drop, tools or anything here, but Surf Your SEO and those type of tools are very helpful because it's like, you hear, oh, I need to rank for this particular keyword or this particular topic cluster, of keywords, but how many keywords do I need to have? How long does the article need to be? And for every single thing that you write, it can be different. How many images do you need? Where do I place the keywords? All that type of stuff. So it's been a great year to just kind of understand, how those different tools can fit in to help you accomplish so much more. So it wasn't even, a negative thing from my perspective. It's all been positive.
That's great. Yeah. No, I've also been using a Surface here recently, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's great to hear that there's not a lot of like as much fear mongering, but rather like bringing it into processes. It's a great outlook on it.
Well, I think when you have the tool and it says this is how, again, the expectations are here, that builds confidence, because then once you understand how it works, you no longer need that scaffolding of the tool as much. You can start to make some intelligent decisions on your own and understand how to read the SERPs better and that type of stuff. And so that's where I really feel like people who do their own websites or have a side project are so much better off, as SEOs than those who don't, because things change almost daily, So if you are, consistently working on a project, you see those changes and you can, you can connect the dots between what was working before and what's going to work next.
Awesome.
And I'm working with a lot of sort of SEOs. Are there any sort of leadership qualities that have really stood out to you that the best SEOs have?
Leadership qualities. Wow. Okay. So my favorite SEOs, their leadership qualities is confidence, in an ever-changing landscape. It's nice to be able to look at somebody and go, what do you think of this? And this is exactly what I think of this. So confidence, definitely. also a spirit of adventure, I would say, because like you said, some people have a spirit of fear. And yeah, there's a lot of unknown, but there's also a lot of opportunity for growth and just, to create something new and amazing. And so that's, I think, a great quality in a leader for sure. Not someone who's, this is how it's always been done, and that's how we're going to do it because it's always been done, but someone who is truly looking towards the future, because right now is, you've got to be looking toward the future. Even if you're looking at right now, it's going to change. So you have to be aware of where things are going versus this is how it used to be. And so that's how we're going to do it. It's like, that's not good enough anymore.
Yeah, definitely not.
Awesome. Just bringing it back to your podcast and your teammates and your team that you work with, how do you ensure a fine balance sort of between accountability, but also, I guess, creative collaboration, all of these like aspects? How do you find a fine balance between that and allowing your team to, I guess, be free and have that creative freedom, but also come in with new ideas and new strategies, but at the same time make sure that the boxes are being checked?
Right. Well, first, again, it comes back to everybody understanding what the common goal is. And, we publish the podcast once a week. So it's not a matter of, I need this back by 2 hours after I send it to you for editing or anything like that. It's that I need it back by this date so that then it can be uploaded and these things can be done by this date. And so that's one of the things I love about remote work more than anything, is that you can be trusted to get the job done. It's not, you have to clock in these hours from, 8 to 9:36, and try to fill them. It's no, this is the job that needs to be done. And this is the timeline. So I think it's really important to be considerate of other people's lives and that type of thing. And try not to say, hey, I need this in 5 minutes. That's a big thing. But if you have understood boundaries where it's like, okay, I'm going to get you XYZ at this time. You're going to get XYZ back to me at this time. Everybody understands how the process is going to work, and they understand their role in that process. They understand the timeline, and then it can work successfully. I think the problem comes when my emergency all of a sudden gets put on you. And it's like, wait a second, that's not right. Just because you didn't do your part doesn't make it right for you to make it someone else's emergency. So that's where it gets a little sticky.
Awesome. Taris, do you have a last question, or can I wrap things up with mine?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay. Last question. I kind of want to just put it into like a future aspect. What strategies do you employ to ensure continuous learning and growth within your team or within the teams that you are coaching?
Yeah. So I think it's really important, number one, to read different articles and, kind of stay up to date. Like my Artifact algorithm feeds me a lot of different things so that I can stay up to date there. So just reading a lot of the search publications. Obviously, Google's website is a great resource itself, and kind of staying up to date on like what is emerging in search and being aware of the connections, because sometimes you'll read something in tech that actually relates to search, but it may not have had like a search headline. And so you can kind of connect those dots again that, oh, this is coming down the pipe, or this is something I should look into, and that type of thing. So definitely, doing your own research, and then, attending conferences and just being aware of industry shifts. That is, one of my favorite things. Like I hope to attend more conferences in the future. And then the last one, I love to go to LinkedIn University, so if you can find, a few people that you really trust that are making moves in, the area that you're most interested in, whether it's SEO as a whole or UX or UI or any piece of it, and follow them and read what they're putting out. That's also going to make a difference, because when you align yourself with thought leaders, you're going to be on the forefront of what's happening next.
Right. Do you have any people you'd like to shout out, or?
Oh my gosh, Andrew Holland. Yeah, Andrew Holland's the big one. I'm a huge Andrew Holland fan. So I'm like his number one cheerleader, I think. But yeah, he's pretty interesting take on different things, you know, and I love when people have a fresh take again, because like I said, when you are working day to day on smaller side projects and you see some consistent issues that people are having now, and then it doesn't align with the past advice that's out there, but it's still being regurgitated, it makes you go, And so when you have someone like an Andrew Holland that comes out and says, hey, by the way, that doesn't make any sense. It's like, yes, that guy understands what I'm going through. So yeah, find yourself somebody on the forefront and you'll be in good shape.
Yeah, he will absolutely love that. So he will.
Yeah, I love LinkedIn University. I'm calling it that from now on.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, awesome. That actually hits our 30-minute mark. Thank you so much, Crystal, for coming on. Really a lot of great topics, questions, and answers from this conversation in this 30 minutes. And yeah, definitely we will shout you out in our comments and when we upload this onto YouTube and put it into our newsletter. So yeah, we really appreciate you for coming on and good luck for 2024.
Thank you. And I'd like to invite anybody who is, you know, kind of learning SEO or wants to teach their teams SEO, you know, to reach out and connect with me because, you know, I'm a big fan of teaching SEO concepts to small businesses.
Brilliant.
Definitely. Brilliant. Awesome. All right. Well, have a great weekend and we'll chat soon.
Thanks so much, Crystal.
All right. Thanks, guys.